Okay, I have to ask you a question about what the president said.
Yeah.
And he was clear that we are not going to allow anything to break this apart. In your assessment, was he referring to the broad-based government, or was he referring to the ODM party? Because speaker after speaker after speaker, speculation after speculation was that the ODM party must remain. Whether we're talking about Waziri Joho, Opiyo Wandayi, John Badi, James Orengo, Osotsi, everybody, Gladys Wanga herself as the chair of the party, everybody came out. Millie Odiambo came and said the same thing. You did yourself, that the party must remain intact in order for whatever to happen. The president also seemingly said the same thing. But what we don't know is whether he was referring to ODM as the party, which would give rise to maybe he could be a candidate for ODM, or whether he was referring to the broad-based government. What's the case here?
In my understanding, the president could only have been referring to the broad-based government because there is no way President William Ruto, who's the leader of UDA, can then speak for ODM, which is, for all intent and purposes, a party in competition with UDA. It is my understanding, and that is why all were united in strengthening the party. Whether we decide to support William Ruto in 2027 by not having a candidate, whether we decide to have a candidate to run against William Ruto, whether we decide to if you want, accept William Ruto as a candidate in our party, the first thing that must be done is that ODM must be strong as a party and not be swallowed by UDA or any other party. And that is not to deny support to the broad-based government. We are in the broad-based government because the government is UDA, but we as ODM have come and lended support to UDA by donating our experts. If we were to be weakened to the point that we do not have a strong voice, then we would not have a party. And certainly, the president cannot, for now, cannot be the spokesperson for ODM. In fact, for ODM to be useful even to the president or UDA, ODM itself must be strong independently as a party. Then my understanding is that when it comes to 2027, if President Ruto still desires the support of ODM, then we must enter a structured negotiation again. We must be very clear that if we are to support UDA, what are the gains? What are the bargaining points? And we cannot do that if we are strong, if we are not strong. We cannot do that if we allow ourselves to be swallowed into UDA for now. And that is why, irrespective of what anyone says, we must remain strong and independent as a party first. Then we can have a strong bargaining and negotiation position. Otherwise, we would have been swallowed into UDA and there would be no interest in negotiating anything with ODM. And that is why my understanding is that the president could only be talking about the broad-based. The president, what the president needs to do is to maintain non-interference with the ODM as a party. That is what would be helpful.
I mean, let's look at the broad-based 10-point agenda. And the reason why I'm talking about the 10-point agenda is at the time when it was formed, one of the key agendas that was there was to deal with police brutality, and that comes to an end. And at the time when those were the irreducible minimum, you see a year later, and there was the killing again of Kenyans in the country. And one would say that we did not hear the voice of ODM as had been before. But let's extrapolate that even further to when Raila Odinga was being taken to Kasarani, and we saw Kenyans who were killed in the presence of a man who fought for these rights, a man who, through the broad-based government, has said no to police brutality. But up to this point, you look at the legacy that was Raila Odinga, and his party, ODM, has not spoken about the killings that happened on the very day. Begs the question, why then is ODM in a union that whose leadership is going against the very agenda that they agreed to deal with in the first place?
First of all, I think a number of people have called out that issue. You remember even at the funeral, Dr. Akinyuenwa spoke to it. And certainly, police brutality is of serious concern, which is why it was in the framework agreement, and it is a work in progress. And I must say that while I think that the police have shown greater restraint than than was the case. You remember, like when we were doing the demos and all, the brutality was at another level. In later times, even with the demos that I now saw, the police have generally shown more restraint. Not that police brutality is gone, it is still there. But I think the fact of having put it in the agenda, required, and with the change of leadership at the IG level and at various other levels below, I think the police have shown a little more restraint. I will tell you, for example, that on the day Raila was brought, and we had all calculated that it would be brought to Parliament, and there was a way that, it had been agreed. And we had all thought that having called Kenyans not to go to the airport, but instead to come to Parliament, Kenyans would come to Parliament and line up and wait. But Kenyans are Kenyans, and when they're mourning their greatest hero, it's a different matter. They broke all cordons at the airport, and they came even up to the airside. Now, the police showed restraint at the airport because they could have tried to use force to prevent them from coming. But I think, acutely aware of the situation, they decided that they would rather allow the breach of air protocols, and by the way, of course, we raised some things there, than use force. Then when it came now to Kasarani, first Parliament. I left the airport and dashed to Parliament because I had still hoped that we would manage. While in Parliament, as we were having a brief meeting with the committee, because I was representing I was actually calling the committee, then we realized that the crowd that was waiting had actually already breached, and they were in the process of breaching the walls of Parliament. Some were on top of the gate. And when I went, I realized that there were hundreds of thousands of people outside of Parliament, and they were threatening, to come into Parliament. Well, even up to that point, the police at least restrained themselves. You could see they had just pulled back. It took me, and I think Babu we had to jump into that crowd, just to try and talk to them and tell them that what they are doing, if they breach Parliament, they will actually not just be betraying, they will be giving the police a reason to stop people from viewing. So we jump right into them and talk to them, and since many of them, they were all Baba's followers, but a majority of them were Luo, obviously. So we were even talking to them in Luo and persuading them and all. Let's just say we managed to stop them from breaching Parliament. Okay? And so as they were coming, in communication, once it was decided that the body goes to Kasarani, because when we were telling them, now we are going to view in Kasarani, they were telling us, no, you people, you must have hidden Baba's remains somewhere. He's not going to Kasarani. So we made sure that the group that was moving toward Kasarani moved slowly enough around Parliament so that they could see. And that's when a majority of them joined the convoy, as it was going to Kasarani. Now, and in Kasarani, I think there was a mistake collectively as organizers, because the state had taken over. All this was being organized by the state, essentially the military. But I think the military are not a very communicative unit. So there was no one in Kasarani to keep talking to people to tell them what was happening. And what was happening, one, is Raila's body had to be moved to Kasarani, but the viewing could not start immediately because they had to do the embalming, having been transported. Now, in that time, Raila is not at the airport, he's not in Kasarani, and there's a lull. So people are thinking they were duped, and no one is talking to them, you see. So that lull and that delay, I think, was the problem. And it was the problem enough that caused the attack. Now, at that point, I think it's understandable that the police may have used force to restrain, forceful. But I think they should, at the very most, have used rubber bullets, not live bullets, because it is clear from the autopsy report that all who died out of bullet wounds.
Yes.
And I thought that rubber bullets would restrain enough without having to kill anyone. And therefore, I personally call out the police for that. I think that was totally wrong. We should not have lost lives for people mourning Raila Amolo Odinga. Yes.
Okay. So even obviously that should not have happened. It's been called out on very many occasions since then by a number of people. And just looking at then what happens thereafter, and looking at a legacy that was left by Raila Odinga, it's not something that can be forgotten. And I've been talking about this for the last couple of days, that my mind goes to the video of the young lady during the protests in 2024. And she said, Agwambo, leave it to us. You have done this for the longest time. You have taught us. Now let us go and do this. So that spirit is very much alive now. This is somebody who is educated. She's thinking. She's clear on what she is seeking for the country for tomorrow, coming from what Raila Odinga has said. So she knows the agenda for the people. Now, I want to go to some of the people who are surrounding Raila, who, from what we hear, might be scared, honestly scared, because they may not come back to government. That people voted them in because Raila said so. Is that fear genuine?
Well, it might or it might not. And from where I sit, I think there's a sense in which there's been an exaggeration in terms of who Raila made to be elected or otherwise.
Okay.
I can tell you that, for example, these last elections in 2022, in all the elective positions, from governor to senator, member of parliament, and at least up to member of parliament, what, at the instructions of Raila, the party did surveys, very quiet surveys, not by one company, but by two and three companies, three separate companies. And the surveys would be like in Rarieda, where I represent.
Yes.
Who are the candidates? What are their popularity rates? For the whole country. Where you hear that there are people who got direct tickets, it's because those ratings by three different companies brought results showing that the popularity rate, yes, is above 70%. In those instances, Raila instructed it would be a waste of money to conduct party primaries, because party primaries are quite expensive. Those who don't know might think that those who got direct tickets, it was because Raila had their hand. No. Raila is a very practical man, was a very practical man. He would only give you the direct ticket once he was sure that you'd win. There are instances, and some people blame Raila. For example, in game, my friend, the late Jacoyo Midiwo, did not get the ticket. Why? Because of this same assessment, despite the fact that he was Raila's cousin and a very close confidant. Twice. So Raila would practically follow the scientific, ratings. Where the rating was low, then the party primaries would be conducted. In other words, it is my understanding that those who are rated highly would still be rated highly even if Raila Amolo Odinga is not there, because I believe we would still use the same processes. Okay? But it is also true that there are people who depended on Raila to be sustained or even for politics, especially not so much in terms of ratings, but in terms of agenda. Okay? But you know what? Elections should be about serving the people. If the people you serve determine that you have done your bit or failed to do your bit and need to elect somebody else, there should not be any problem.
Okay.
Because that is the nature of elections. And so I think that we're in a situation, just like we are facing the by-elections that are coming now, we're in a situation where people will still robustly, voters. They will still robustly either be elected or unelected. And if you are not elected, you just thank the people for having given you the opportunity to lead them.
Okay.
If you are elected, it is your business to do that which you promised the people to do.
Let's take that to the presidential level. Because also, and it's interesting because this conversation is around speculation, but to a great degree, but truthfully, speculation sometimes then becomes a reality. Now, when this happened, before anything had even been said or done, speculation again was rife that President William Ruto then may be a bit nervous about the future. Entering into a broad-based government, one of the things that they said very clearly at that time was that there needed to be some kind of stability in the country, especially following the protests against the finance bill in the middle of 2024. And that to join hands into government in this instant would bring about, an acceptable level of peace, and that there would be some kind of stability. And ODM coming into this agreement with the Kenya Kwanza government essentially is what was seen to be able to do this under the leadership of Raila Odinga. Exit Raila Odinga, and that support then seems as though it's wobbly. So, does the president have something to worry about?
Well, certainly. And I think in his speech in Bondo, the president acknowledged that. He acknowledged that the absence of Raila certainly puts him in a difficult position. I mean, that is the naked truth. Because it is true, as you say, that where the country was headed, had Raila not joined hands with William Ruto, we could have been in a different position. And that explains one of Raila's most outstanding qualities: the love of the nation of Kenya as a nation. Throughout the years, you will realize that no matter what it was, if it came to a stage where the nation of Kenya as a nation was threatened, Raila would back down, even against opposition. In 2007, a lot of the people around Raila, including President Ruto right now, did not want Raila to back down, to join in the unity government. A lot of people were against it, but he insisted and said, we cannot take Kenya to the dogs. And that is the position he has maintained in every other subsequent election. And that is the position he maintained during the Gen Z's revolution. It was not for him, it was not for ODM, but it was for Kenya as a country. So the fact, the nervousness is real, and the president himself has conceded that. But I think that, there are moments when things can happen. And if that moment passes, usually you do not, it's not easy to reenact it. I think that while some of the concerns by the Gen Zs have been addressed, many have still not been addressed, but that moment passed. That is not to say that we can, wish away what the Gen Zs were raising. They must still be addressed. But I think that moment, it was actually a revolutionary moment. I think it passed. I think it toned down. And we have got to a situation where, and it's very sad, that in Raila passing, I've been seeing a lot of, in the social media, even the Gen Zs themselves are in disagreement. There are some Gen Zs who unfortunately have been celebrating the death of Raila, and there are Gen Zs who are mourning, and so they've ended up in this fierce exchange, almost violent exchange on social media. The point is, the unity of the Gen Zs at that point and the purpose for which they were, united was real. It was hijacked by other people who wanted to use it for a different reason, and we can discuss that at a later date. But that moment passed. The president is nervous and has to be nervous, but I do not think that the death of Raila Amolo Odinga by itself can, recreate that moment. So I believe that President Ruto will and should serve his term up to 2027. Beyond, we can discuss. But I also believe that we must all strive to address all those issues that were of concern to the Gen Zs.